Good afternoon. Thank you for coming after eating lunch and having a little nap. I appreciate you waking up for me. Thank you very much. My name is Heather Downing. I'm really excited to be in Copenhagen. It's my first time here. And I'm from Kansas City, Missouri in the United States, home of the most famous barbecue in the United States. I will fight people. However, War Pigs was pretty good last night. I was impressed. I mean, as a Midwesterner, you guys can hold your own. That was pretty good. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today in case any of you want to just like run to another session, okay? So I've worked for many different clients over the course of my career, but most recently for the past 3 years, right before I came to Okta, I worked at a marketing company that represented some of the largest companies in the world, Fortune 50. And so because of that, I have had some unique experiences with what it really means to work with things, especially when you have to do them rapidly, but they still have to be production ready to a point, right? There's a difference between something needs to go live by the Super Bowl because the Super Bowl does not move a date, and I need to ship a product that we own. You know, there's a difference between those two. I don't really know the split in the room. So how many of you work on a product long term? Like, okay, several of you, right? And so the other half of you maybe do either consulting or you have many different projects? Yes? Okay, cool. All right, well, for this, I was given the task recently, right before I came to Okta, to work with a .NET shop that could not cut over to .NET Core yet because too much of their infrastructure was invested in 4.7. Okay, so this is all going to be in 4.7. It's going to be in .NET. It's not going to be .NET Standard. Just so you're aware that this is what I'm going to show you because so many of the larger companies still are on it. So it's possible that many of you are already way in front of us, but this is just the example I'm going to give. Secondly, I was asked many times by different junior and mid developers that it's hard to put all the puzzle pieces together, that you can attend a talk or watch a tutorial on a piece of what you need to do, but string them together, of course, eventually is what makes the seniors and the engineers above that, right? So they just kind of wanted, can in an hour can you just kind of point me from like A to Z where exactly I would be going? So that's what we're going to kind of do here. For those of you who are very high level, this might be a little bit more basic for you, but I wanted to put forth what it was actually like to do all of this and the decisions that I made, okay? So within the course of 60 minutes or so, I'm gonna see if we can just go from file new all the way to a working API, completely hosted on Azure. I want to do that this whole time. The only thing I'm not going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do in-memory for the CRUD right now because there's so many different databases I've dealt with over the years. I mean, right now Postgres is all the rage, but I also just dealt with a bunch of Firebase before we talked them into graduating to Cosmos DB. So, you know, because they're all over the place, I thought that was less valuable, and so I'm just going to put that in memory for now because that is a whole nother step. All right, so anybody have any questions before I get started then? Cool. So basically, you get to code along with me. This is like a fireside chat. It is also very open, so you don't have to like wait until the end. If you have a question while I'm going, please say something. But please understand that this is just what I've experienced and discovered. I'm not an expert. I certainly don't work at Microsoft, but this is what I have gone through and decided that if they needed me to build something in a day, this is kind of what I could do pretty quickly. Okay, make sense? Excellent. All right. So one of the cool things about what I get to do is I get to see all the new things. I get to go to conferences and travel a lot. I get really excited when I go to a session and something that could possibly make my life easier is presented. It goes kind of like this. Create this thing, deploy this thing, profit. Sound familiar? It is. Now, I will say that the piece of it that they show probably really is this easy if you do it exactly that way and you don't deviate, right? But I'm going to give you an example today. So this is kind of the objectives that we're going to do today, all right? We'll see if I can get them all in. First, we're actually going to start with what you should do, which is create a repository. I know that's not usually what the tutorials show, but I'm going to do that today. Then we create the project, okay? Or sometimes if you want to go ahead and allow Visual Studio to do that for you, you can do them both at the same time. Sometimes you don't always have that option, but here you go. Then we're just going to deploy it with a quick publish, okay? Yes, this is the famous right-click publish because it's important to show that you can at least get a proof of concept out there rapidly. I'm asked often, can you just show somebody, they just want to see it or they just want to see the data coming through real quick? And that is something that sometimes happens before you land a contract on a very large project, okay? So that is sometimes done. Then we make some changes, and then we set up the continuous integration stuff. Now, it would be great if we could start right there. And sometimes you can. But again, especially if you're trying to prove something out, it's a little bit difficult to jump right in. Then you need to see what broke once you did that. Then you need to set up your CRUD endpoints, okay? We'll do that there. And then redeploy it and see what broke. This is actually what it's like to go back and forth. Then we need to talk about securing that API because I understand that not everybody shows this. And unfortunately, I have mentored many different interns that were not under my direct supervision and didn't pay any attention to securing the API because they really didn't know what to choose and where to go with it. So we made a choice for them later on. But this is something that I decided I would show as well. Now again, there we go. And then you have to redeploy it and see what broke again, okay? Then we can create some client access credentials that you would hand to whoever else wants to consume your API, which is important to understand. And then you test it out, then you profit. That is much more like what you'd actually have to do. Again, there are micro steps in between these, of course, but that's like, I think that there's really like 13 steps to really get anything off the ground. Okay, all right. So we're gonna combine these two in the interest of time, and we're just going to allow Git to create a repo at the same time with Visual Studio. For those of you who've known, I've been having scaling issues this whole time. It seems like it just doesn't wanna stay. That's better. That looks more normal. Okay, cool. All right, let's file new. That's always exciting to do. All right, for this, and I'm going to tell you why in a second, I'm going to go ahead and just look up which projects you can use Web API, and in this case, I'm going to choose the .NET Framework version. The reason I'm going to do this is because when we deploy it after we do the quick publish, when we deploy it to Azure, we're going to use CUDO. Does anyone know what CUDO is in the room? A couple of you? That's actually what is behind your Azure publishing tools inside of Visual Studio, except you get to hook into it for continuous integration with whatever repo you choose. Okay? Now, they'll give you two options. You can do that, or you can do the shiny brand new Azure DevOps. But depending on your company, that may not actually be an option for you to set up a whole organization and do all of that. If you just really want something that will throw it out there, that was the reason that CUDO was put together. However, if you are doing a full, I call it the full framework, but really it's just .NET 4 X, right, framework, you can't choose the .NET Standard library here. I thought that was very strange. At least not if you're going to use continuous integration with CUDO. Because right now, it assumes you're one or the other. You're either .NET Core, .NET Standard, or you are full framework all the way. Now, right now, we know that we can go in between, but since .NET Standard is not really going to be available for 4X, once Core 3 comes out, I'm not going to worry about it too much, but that definitely took a couple of days of me figuring out why things could be published directly from Visual Studio, but it was not able to be done in continuous integration. Okay, are you guys following me? Cool. All right, I decided we're gonna name this the Real World Guide API, and go ahead and leave it right there. And see, I'm sure everybody here is a master of Visual Studio 2017, so I'm just gonna leave everything checked there. And leave that checked there. Okay, if you're interested in anything about Visual Studio 2019, I just did a blog post about some settings that you can enable that kind of gives you a little bit more bang for your buck out on Okta's developer blog. So if you're interested, I'll show you that later. Okay, all right, cool. Hooray, we have one. Now, who here has never used Azure Developer Tools in Visual Studio before? Okay, cool. The great news is that's available for you to download as an extension. Very exciting. I have already downloaded the extension and installed it inside of Visual Studio, so it already knows that those options are available to me. So now that everything's here, I'm just going to go ahead and right-click on the solution, which is my favorite thing to do, and publish. So here, because I'm signed in, if you notice on the top right, I'm already signed in with my developer account that also is the same as our Azure account. Okay, so because they're already connected, I don't need to physically go to the portal at all for this step. I can do it all through Visual Studio. I want to create a new app service, and it will always, prepend the date right after it and the time. API. Let's see if it'll do this one. How about maybe? Oh, it doesn't like that. Hold on. Let me give it that. Yes. Cool. We are there. All right. I've set everything to Europe. I'm going to go ahead and create that. The nice thing about this is that you don't have to go into the portal at all. Now, if you are you guys, anybody here from a rather large company where DevOps is separate from development at all? A couple of you? Okay. So sometimes, like I was not allowed to actually go into the portal and log in, but I was given access to create new things through this way or through the Azure CLI tool as well. So it depends on what you like to do. Most of the developers under me prefer the visual aspect of Visual Studio, which is why we're not doing everything command line today. But the only downside to it is that it just takes a second to do it. Also, I have no idea how the internet connection is going, but we'll see. Okay, so while this is pushing out, it looks like something's happening. Woot. Okay, the reason I like to do this first is because it's instant gratification and I have no patience. So it's really good to know also right here if anything breaks within your application. You should be able to tell right away, but this is right out of the box. However, has any of you ever run into any issues with the templates that come inside Visual Studio being outdated at all? Because I have, specifically around things like Bootstrap or any of the JSON stuff. It seems like it's always a few versions behind. And even though I keep my updates on, it doesn't always cut over. So sometimes the first thing you have to do is update everything. But we're not going to worry about that right now because it looks like everything built perfectly. This is exciting. So while that is loading out there, I'm just going to kind of show you what this looks like in our Azure portal. Woot. There we are. There's your app service. So I didn't even have to log in to do that. But this is probably old hat to some of you. Okay, cool. So now it looks like we got here and all the default value endpoints should be there because that was the very first thing out of the box for the API, Web API tutorial. Cool. All right. So now that we have all that, now we need to make a change or so. So the first change that I'm going to go ahead and make is I want to add, see, oh, this just looks so, it must be easier for you to read though, huh? I'm sorry. I just have no real estate that way. Okay, cool. I'll figure that out eventually on here. Cool. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add a useful controller. Do something useful, right? I'm going to add a new controller. And this is just going to be a Web API 2 controller. It can be empty because I've got everything kind of situated. This one is going to be called a location controller because what we're going to do here is simulate trying to discover where are the events that the developer advocates for Okta are right now. So like I'm here, but some people are in San Francisco, and eventually this API is going to be able to serve up several applications just for the location-based data, and it's going to hook directly into like our calendars, both in Google and Outlook. So that's the goal of this. So this is actually a real project get to be a part of right in the beginning. And let me grab this. Okay, cool. So let's just go ahead and do a basic test. Cool. All right, so now that I made a change to this, I'm going to go ahead and fix those using. Now I'm going to connect to Team Explorer. Right away, it shows that this right here is the extension GitHub for Visual Studio. If you haven't installed it, you don't have to. I've used Git Bash. I've used many other things, Visual Source Save as well, which is a little deprecated, but it's still something I use. So if I want to publish it to GitHub, it'll ask me to, it'll automatically populate if I'm signed in, which I am, and publish from there. So now that we're publishing, cool. That should go straight out to my GitHub, depending on when it gets out there. Update 90 seconds ago. Woo, we got it. All right, so now that it's out there, great. So now we have basic, source control that we've got right now, which you should always do. I have made the mistake before on proof of concepts to put everything locally and forget to set this up. So I've just decided now that I make one change and immediately do it. Okay, cool. So now, all right, set up CI and see what broke. It sounds like a fun thing to do. Oh no, is it gonna do this every time? Oh, it's gonna do this every time. I'm so sorry. That's all right. Open for suggestions. All right. Cool. So now that we have that all situated, we're going to go into the app service that we just created and set it up for GitHub, okay? So in this case, it's this one right here. You're going to go down to Deployment Center. And they're kind of populate with a couple of different options. Now, where I came from, we used Bitbucket a lot. Does anybody here use that as well? No, just me, okay. So everybody else is GitHub, right? Awesome. You're like, no, we have some private thing, right? Yeah. Well, the good news is that you can do FTP if you want. You have lots of different options. You don't have to set it up through Azure repos, just so you're aware. So we just continue after that's suggested. And then here are the two options here. Because Azure Pipelines is still in preview and they're constantly changing things, that's the reason that I chose CRUD, okay? Because it's been around for a little bit, except for the caveat, which you don't want to mix .NET Standard with the framework version that you have. Okay, we're going to continue there. Now that it's gone out, because I'm already signed into the GitHub account. So it gives me two options. This is my organization here on the bottom. This one right here is my, for lack of a better word, my speaker account that I like to use. So we're going to use that one. And it automatically populates whatever repos are out there, right? So I think the one that we did is this one, I believe. And we're going to just use the master branch as our publishing branch. Okay, so anytime I check anything into that, it should automatically pull it and rebuild. Okay? All right, cool. I'm going to finish that. And as it's setting up a deployment, this was the very first step where I was like, oh, that was pretty easy. That's pretty good. If you'll notice in here in a second, it'll show the first build that it's trying to do. And the status immediately was failed. This is the very first one that I saw. So sometimes that has to do with whether or not you forked a repo from somewhere else and then deleted the Git file and then tried to check it in. There's a couple of things that could be there. Right here, obviously the status is pending. Right now it's just doing the initial commit and pull. This is a live window. I sometimes refresh because it seems like, depending, at right around 10 minutes, it seems like the JavaScript stops working. And so sometimes you have to refresh the window. But in general, it should be automatically just refreshing what that pending status is. All right, so while it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and add something in here. That is a change. Cool. So it looks like they're still running that deployment right there. What I could do right now is I could, again, directly publish from here and it would override because I still have the same access to that app service as the repo. So whatever is the most recent thing is the thing that gets to be shown and displayed. Okay, just important to know to not step on toes. That's part of the reason a lot of people say that once you've done it, like abandon it and go through the proper channels of making sure that you go through a pull request and merging in your branch with master so it can do this properly. But if I were to change all this, it would show, but as soon as I push a change, then it would also override. Cool. It says I have success, but because it basically looked the same as we had before, that's not really proof, is it? So in that case, I'm going to go ahead and take this. Oop. Yes, okay. I added a location controller and test. Cool. I'm going to commit that, sync that, and push. All right. Well, that's pushing. I'm really interested in what testing tools you like to use for APIs. I like to use Postman, but I've definitely done my fair share. Back in the day when I just used Swagger for everything, I would also do that, but that required the use of me actually building the project and throwing it out there instead of me doing it this way. So what I have here is I actually preset up the kinds of, eventually, right now we only have one, but eventually the kinds of gets that I want to have, and then we're going to go from there and also do the rest of the CRUD actions. So the very first one that I'm really interested in, see if I can, is the test. So let's get, I need to get that URL here. Cool. All right. Since I already had that set up, it's just easier for me to do that and see if I can hit it. Now, I'm assuming that it's already built. It may not be built, but it should be. Let's see what it says. Well, it looks like the second one went out there. It also shows the check-in message, so you know exactly which commit you had, which is pretty cool. And let's see what Postman did. Looks like it just rebuilt, but there you go. Now we've got our change. This is very gratifying for me. I was very excited to see that this was the case, right? So now we've got at least a true connection, a true relationship all the way up, right? Good. Awesome. So now let's do something a little bit more with this. If anybody knows how to get the scaling to stay, you will be my friend for life. That's what happens when you get a brand new Mac. Sorry. All right. All right, so let's set up our CRUD endpoints. Oh, the sadness. It's okay. There's no such thing as perfect development either. So, okay, eventually I'm going to get this. Okay, cool. So now let's set up the rest of the CRUD endpoints. I happen to just have them all here. So let's go ahead and do those. I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple more. Come down. And okay, cool. All right. Yes, I have a region in there. So I like to do this first because it points out that I haven't added anything else. I haven't added any of the models that I want to add in. This is also the most effective way for me to train my junior developers as to why it's important to do things in a certain order. However, I mean, I'm one of those people that eventually will just add a using this way. Absolutely. Go do it. So in order to do this, I decided that I would show like the separation. I'm sure that lots of you have your opinions about what kind of architecture you would like to do. There's many different kinds out there. For this, I just wanted to show that it was possible to still publish regardless of how many projects that you had in this solution. And so we're going to add a data project, okay? Maybe. Oh, thank you very much. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to go ahead and add a class library. Make sure there's lots of templates in here, so I want to make sure I get the right one. Yes, cool. I'm just going to call it the same thing, real world guide.data. That's what I choose to call it. You can choose to call it whatever you'd like. And there are two models I'm going to use for here. Even though I'm only showing you the location data, which is like the event, the location that the event is at, eventually I am going to build all this out. So that's part of the reason that I added more than one. Cool. All right. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And we're going to add an event class. Cool. Cool. There we go. It just saves me typing time. All right. And if you notice, there's a list here of advocates, so I need to add that as well to this model. If you're wondering why I'm not using keyboard shortcuts, it's because I'm on a Mac and I'm in a VM for Windows, and I have not set up what those shortcuts are going to be yet. All right. Okay, cool. Set that up. Don't worry, we're almost done. Cool. All right, so now that we have both of those, I just need to do a couple of things. I need to make sure that that builds.
You have this region problem.
I'm sorry?
There's a region. You're missing a region start. Sorry, it's the
That one? No, you're good. The only thing it's missing is its reference to the data project now. I just wanted to make sure that the data project built and I didn't miss anything. So now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and add a reference to the project, which usually populates right away. Cool. All right. So now that that's been added, now I can reference it. So oh, yes. There we go. I guess I didn't name it properly all the way. This is about the time where I'd be like, no, we're going to refactor that, but I'm sure that's boring to you. So that's better. Looks like we're only missing a couple more usings now. Just system net. And go ahead and look at that using real quick. I'll just make sure that that's all good. All right, let's just investigate. I think everything looks like it's pretty good. So what I've done here is I did a couple of static methods right here that just go ahead and give me some sample data. But if you notice, I have, especially on this one right here, I have a getter and setter. So this is where we're going to go ahead and add additional models in memory while we are like in Postman, okay? I decided to just do it for this one so you could see how it's done, but normally you would hook this up to any database of your choice using whatever ORM of your choice. For something like what I'm going to do, Entity Framework is amazing, but sometimes you don't have any say in the access to the database and you have to interact in a different way. So sometimes you want to choose a lighter ORM. In this case, I'm going to choose Dapper in the future because it's light enough for that, but there are many like Petapoco as well as great. So it depends on how much heavy lifting you're going to be able to really do. All right, so now we've got something that looks halfway decent here, hopefully. Yes, okay, cool. Now let's see if I can just look at the location. All right, so now that we have that, I'm just gonna build a solution real quick, make sure everything is good. Awesome. All right, cool. And all I'm going to do is check it in now. All right. Okay. Add a data project and remaining CRUD endpoints. Cool. All right. We're syncing that, pushing it out there. I'm going to go ahead and start setting up this to get ready for that. So I'm going to grab our URL, and of course you can use any sort of CNAME you'd like if you would rather have your formalized .com. I've at least for me, we always would do that so that at least we would white label it. Okay, let's go ahead and look at getting events here. That's perfect. And of course, I'm assuming everybody here has done an API before? Everyone? Awesome. So I don't have to tell you how to do routing so that you understand how it gets here. Cool. If you're interested, this is also on the GitHub project, so you're welcome to grab it. And I'm just going to check to see how we are doing. It looks like that failed. Ooh, why did it fail? So this is an example of what I dealt with before, right? You can look at the logs for this. And it says that, oh, it has that default namespace error. It's very frustrating, isn't it? So the way that I got around this before is to delete that data project, and because it didn't like that class library, because that class library was a .NET Standard class library. Yes, very frustrating. So instead, what I had to do is I had to just move them within the project, and it was able to go. So lots of gotchas. Like, Azure's very powerful, but it kind of depends on what you're doing and your situation, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and move it over there. Cool, move the event over there. And add the advocate as well. Cool. All right, so now that they're there, let's go ahead and just move that over. All right, remove the usings. That should be set. Let's grab the other one. I think I have learned more from what is not possible than what is possible. It's interesting. Okay. All right, so those two are moved over. That means we can officially kill this project. Remove the project. I'm just going to go ahead and move it there. Cool. So now that I've moved everything, that means I just have to add the models or API models namespace there. So now every one of them should still resolve. Yep, perfect. All right, so we're going to go ahead and rebuild that. Is it interesting though? It would work here. Like I would be able to push that if I were to right-click publish. It would work. It's only just the specifications of Kudo that would not allow it to do that. Okay, so that succeeded. So we're going to try this again and put that in. Moved models to web API project. Cool. All right, let's sync that and see if it does anything different. Cool. So while that was prepping, this is kind of a little bit of a preview of what you should see here based on that. And so just trying to get everything prepped. I like how fast that does things though. I like how quickly it's able to identify that check-in. So we'll see what it does. But yeah, this is where you would go and identify any sort of failure or problem. It's a little bit of an issue though, if you don't run this from like a tool yourself that you're able to see the failure, you'd have to have a login or at least be able to log in with your CLI. So looks like that was successful that time. Imagine that. It usually just takes a couple of seconds to hit, but I'm going to see if we can hit it regardless. Especially now that the server is all nice and warmed up. All right. Let's see if we get those. Usually the first time it's a little slow. Cool. All right, so there we go. I pulled everything up. Nice. Now I'm interested though to see if we can't just make sure to test out. I mean, you can do the deletions and the puts. I'm just going to go ahead and do a post real quick. So over here, I'm going to just take that one, put it back over here. So now, instead of this, I'm just going to go ahead and take off the events and change this to a post. Put this in the body. I don't know, everybody here is familiar with Postman, yes? Anybody not? Okay, cool. I'm in good company. Good to know. Set it to raw text for JSON. Cool, so we're going to set that to NDC Copenhagen. Cool, I've got a 201 created, and just to prove that it actually worked, I'll just go ahead and change that back to a get. And now it should be at the bottom, okay? So we have proven that we've been able to not just do the gets, but also writing data as well. And it was all done completely through continuous deployment in Azure. Awesome, great. Now, sorry, I should just know these all by heart, but. Okay, so now we have to secure the API, right? Because I don't want all my data out there. I don't want somebody who's stalking me or something knowing that I happen to be in Copenhagen today, right? So it's better if the right people have that information. Cool. So in order for that to happen, I looked into something that, of course, now I work for them, but at the time I did not. And I looked into doing some authentication work via the almost. All right, there we go. I was interested in securing things via Owen. I'm sure, has anybody used Owen before? Okay, so you're all security experts. This is probably old hat to you. But for me, I need to go ahead and add some dependencies for that, and I have a little bit of information here for that. These are the 4 that I need to add. I need to add system web based on Owen, the Owen self-host for web API. Then I'm also going to need to add the security JSON web token and OpenID Connect. That's how we're going to do all of this, okay? All right, so everyone's different. Some people use the package manager, but everybody, at least in my shop, really likes NuGet, so that's what we're going to do. All right, cool. I'm going to look and browse for that. You guys are probably the most attentive crowd I've ever had, so this is awesome. Okay, cool. I'm going to add that and accept that. I'm surprised all this is working. I'm thrilled to death that we have good internet. Jimmy Bogart was the one who's like, you need to try it. It's a thrill to see everything work. All right. Cool. Let's do that one. Install this one. See, I understand that some of this may be boring to some of you, but for a lot of us, it was nice to see like what happens in a row. This one takes the longest. It always annoys me, so I always copy over the next one I'm supposed to look for. And it'll change color as soon as it's ready. But what I decided to do with this is I want to secure the endpoints by putting an authorize attribute on top of it. And Owen is the library that allows us to do that. Okay, so we got that. Cool. All right, just have 2 more, and then we'll be done with that. Maybe. Oh, it's still going. There we go. It also gives heart attacks because it looks like it's pre-building it before all the dependencies are there. It's very strange. Let's see if I can. Maybe. Or not. My poor clipboard. There we go. Good job. Cool. All right, and just one more. I promise. Cool. All right, here we go. And believe it or not, we're almost done. Cool. All right, good deal. And OpenID Connect. All right. All right, so now that we have all of that, we want to create the ability to secure this and hand over a token between yourself as the API and whoever consumes you that you have authorized, right? So OpenID Connect facilitates this, and depending on whether or not you want to write your own stuff or wait until Microsoft includes other additional things for you to add, I decided to go with what my company does, which is Okta. So they are the actual identity provider. So they are both AD, like similar to Active Directory, but they also can be the identity provider for what you need to do. So in order for that to get set up, I wanted to make sure everything was good here. Looks like everything is so far. Cool. Let's just add that authorized attribute now that it's available to us. Cool. The next thing we're going to do is add a startup file. In order for this to happen, I'm just going to go ahead and call it startup CS and copy this over. Cool. Let's make sure everything else looks the same. I think so. Nice. All right, so just so you understand what's happening here is that there's a couple of things that I'm pulling out of what would normally be in the web config, okay? The reason I like to use Azure is because they have app settings that you can set directly inside of the portal. You can also use the CLI tool for this as well. You can use infrastructure as a service and save your scripts to do this as well. But just so that I don't check everything in with all of that, I wanted to show you how I was setting up both who the authority is and who the audience is. And this particular method is setting up the discovery of what that configuration is. It's pulling that down and setting up the JSON Web Token bearer authentication piece here. And so these two right here are the ones that are kind of up to you. Identity Server is another one. Okta is one. Auth0 is one. You can use many of them without having to write it yourself. But of course, you can always write it yourself. So if you're interested in not doing that, let's go into our web config. And I think I probably signed out right by now. Oh, I guess I'm not. Cool. This is the Okta dashboard whenever you sign up for a developer account. You get a lot of free usage out of this. It's also forever free. It just depends on how much you want to scale up before you even would have to pay anything. So it's a lot that's provided to you. What you need to do is anytime you create an application, you need to add an application here. Okay? So what I've done is I've added an application already. All you have to do is name it and set it up here. And then down here at the bottom, once you have generated an application inside of Okta's portal, it gives you the client ID and secret right here. The other thing that you're going to want to do is in order for the client, I got to say this correctly. I want to make sure I say this correctly. In order for the client credentials to flow, you need to set a scope for it. Okay? So if you go up here to API authorization servers, you get one out of the box. It's your default. It has a whole bunch of things like name and ID already for whatever users you have. But over here, like you would set up like scopes for that particular server that you needed. And by doing that, you'd go over to scopes, and I added manage lists right here. And this is how we would handle a machine-to-machine situation. So whenever you create a new application, you just create a new Okta application and choose machine-to-machine because that's what our APIs are, right? A lot of the other things will include like a UI for if you were doing like an Angular application, it would inject that for you. You wouldn't even need to create the login page at all. It would redirect. So in this case, this just handles the brokerage of that token for you. So now that we have those couple of things, let's make sure that our web API reflects. Okay, make sure we've got everything here. Here's our app settings. Cool. So you'll notice like right in between the app settings that are already in here, I just need to add those two keys. But notice the value is that the value is set in the Azure app settings. So technically speaking, if you were just run this here and not deploy it, it wouldn't work, correct? But I also don't want it to work here. You can certainly try it out if you'd like locally, but I'm about ready to check this in, okay? So I'd like to not do that, right? Cool. And then I want to make sure everything is good. Okay, I think we've got everything there. I'm going to go ahead and build this one time, and we are rolling. I still have 15 minutes. This is good. All right, cool. Build succeeded. So now that that's all set to go, before I check this in, I want to go into our service and add those two app settings. Okay? Cool. So make sure I have this right. Yes. Okay. So down here under application settings, configuration, also right underneath it says preview, has it laid out a little bit differently, but they are basically the same thing. It's just a different view. Scroll down here and you will see that there's already one that's set up. You can just add a new setting right here, and I'm just going to enter the name. We're going to call it audience, for example, and then whatever the value was for this. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and swap over to where I stuck that. Do I have any questions while I'm doing this? No? Yes? Okay. All right then. You guys are awesome. I'm missing. I'm sorry about that. Let me grab that, make sure it's correct. There we go. So this is what I'm taking out. Where'd it go? I thought I was looking at it. I guess I was not. Let me scroll down for a second. Here's manage list. Nobody. Okay, here we go. So if you notice right here, you could have set the authority and hard-coded it. You could have put it in the web config, but instead, I want to take out like the audience, which right here is the name of wherever your authentication server is, which you can see over here in your Okta server. So if we were to go back to authorization servers, there's the audience right there. So that's what we need for this. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up right here. Cool. And add another one, which is, I'm going to copy it up here. Cool. And that is my authority. Okay. I'm sorry, I always do that. Okay. So now regardless, technically speaking, I could just not include this and it would still work. I tried it earlier. If I don't like list it at all in the web config, it still injects it. So but I'm referencing something in code that a developer would not be able to follow. So for readability purposes, it's important. It used to be that you had to have a representative of this setting in the web config, but you don't anymore. Like it works without it. But again, if you were trying to figure out what is this file that they're talking about, like what is this configuration right here? If they can't find it. So that's the reason that this is here. Okay, cool. It also helps the ghosting problem. You're like, I don't know, something's happening once I stick it out in Azure. This helps create parity between the two of them. Cool. All right, now that I have all of that, let's go ahead and check that in. I added Owen and Azure app setting config. Cool. Anybody catching anything that I missed? No? You never know. I've got a bunch of awesome people in this room. Okay, so that's pushing this. So we'll see how that goes. But what it should require now is that as soon as I hit that endpoint again, it should tell me that I'm not authorized. So we're going to do that first. So it looks like that successfully pushed it. Let's go back here to the deployment center and take a look. Awesome. Okay, maybe it will show us. Yay, it looks like it's running it. Awesome. I just want to wait till it's successful, and while it's doing that, I should be able to hit the same endpoint because we put it at the very top of the controller. I didn't put it on an individual API endpoint, I put it on the whole thing. So regardless of whichever endpoint I hit, it should tell me to go take a hike. Says it's successful. We'll see. The first time I hit it after it builds, it always seems to be a little slow, but let's go ahead and hit it and see what it says. I'd expect it to tell me no. I'm sorry. There are some things now that you need to do in order to, you have to actually generate the token. It's cool. But generating the token is the last thing that we're doing. And then it goes straight into questions. Yes, we have been denied. Excellent. So now that we've been denied, we need to fix that. Whenever you're setting things up for whoever's going to consume this, I'm going to treat this as if it's going to be somebody else in my company or like an actual trusted application, and not here's a public API to hit. There's a different path that you would go through for that, and the generation of the client IDs and secrets, okay? This is not that, this is much more for just specific situations. Now, what if you notice in Okta's portal, it already has like a client ID and secret set up. You can also set up multiple ones to hit this API as well, so that you can say, this is the one for my team, this is the client ID and secret for someone else. You can also set that up if you're interested. Cool. So now that we set all this up, there's a couple things that we need to do. I'm going to go back to setting up a post, okay? We're going to say, NDC is everywhere. Cool. Looks like that's all set up. All right, so now everything's set up here, it looks like, but you need to go over to the authorization tab. And as long as you drop this down and select OAuth 2.0 and set everything up, you should be able to request a new access token. By default, it's set to 1 hour expiration. You can make it as short as you would like. You can also make it as long as you would like. That's configurable as well, but this is pretty standard, especially if you want to prevent long living tokens in the API fashion. Okay, so let's just get access to a new token. This is what it would look like to put in those information. Okay, as long as they've got the token URL, which is set up usually /v1/token. You can do multiple versions of your token as well. Your client ID and secret, I'm just showing it to you here so you can see it, but I'm deleting it so you can't steal it. And make sure to add the scope manage lists. Okay, this manages the list of APIs that it needs. Okay. And make sure you set it to basic auth header. Okay, any questions? Grant type needs to be client credentials in order to fill out these fields. We're going to request the token. Now that it has a token, Postman's very nice and says, would you like me to say this for you for the next hour while you're trying to do all these calls? And you say, yes, I want you to use the token. Of course, you would also do this in code if you wanted to go ahead and call, but this at least allows you to try out as the consumer of the API what it would look like and any problems you would have. So now that you have that all set to go, now we can send it. And we got a created successfully, okay? And just to prove that it really is in there, let's go ahead and get that. And there we go. Hooray! So we've done quite a bit, right? We tested it out, and now we profit, right? Do I have any questions? No? Awesome. So now that we have built an API in roughly the steps you would probably need to take within 60 minutes, I assume that you can very easily go to your other juniors and mid-level developers and walk them through this in a day. If you have any questions, please hit me up on Twitter and stay curious. Thank you.